Today's Monday, March 29,
Approaching right now.
2021.
We're actually in the town of Flagstaff, Arizona. And what we're going to do is we're going to go someplace we have not gone to before, even though we've been to Flagstaff several times. And that place is the Percival Lowell Observatory. And we're going to be driving up the road again, maybe another half a mile, and we'll take a right. And surprisingly, looking at our navigator program, which we affectionately call Maggie, it looks like the observatory is in town. And it's only about a mile diagonally from our current position. We're currently at an altitude of 6,900 feet. In terms of astronomical observatories, that's pretty low, but this observatory was founded back in the 1880s. Interestingly enough, the observatory location was located by a fellow who originated the whole idea of tree rings and examining tree rings for the weather, because he was interested in the big picture long term of the weather here in this area to determine whether or not there would be factors impacting the use of the observatory meteorologically. Yeah, interestingly enough, Vanessa and I have often stumbled by this park without actually realizing how close we were to the observatory. As you can see in the camera, and Vanessa will probably zoom in, there is apparently an astronomical dome right up on the ridgeline where you'd expect to find it.
Approaching left turn.
Because obviously you want the widest horizon possible for astronomical observations. Now the interesting thing about the observatory is that it was at a time when photography originally was not used extensively, astrophotography and astronomy. And Percival Lowell himself was a visual astronomer, and he was quite good at making notes and sketches of what he was seeing.
Right turn.
And now we are tracking to find the actual location of the observatory parking lot. You can see once again, the observatory is right downtown. Here's a town park in Flagstaff Park. As you can see, Santa Fe Avenue is right near what is called Thorpe Park, sports and recreation area. Another thing Vanessa points out is we'll be taking a right up here, and it goes up to the side of a hill. And what do you think they called that hill? Vanessa, what'd you find out?
Mars.
Mars Hill. And there's a reason for that, because Percival Lowell was particularly interested in the planet Mars.
Must be Mars.
We were just getting a lowdown from one of the locals here. His name is Paul. He works here for the park district. And basically, he was outlining what's going on with Flagstaff Observatory. Apparently, it's not so much of a research center anymore. It does only have a 24-inch achromatic refractor. But you can go in there, you can lay down some bucks, you can go and you can get time at the eyepiece if you want. So also there is some other serious astronomy going on here, but it is not right here on the campus of the Lowell Observatory. It's further out, and basically they set up some nice observatories that are being actively used for astronomical research. Probably, among other things, in the area of exoplanets, because it doesn't take some really advanced equipment to detect the transits of exoplanets around stars. So I imagine that kind of research is still possible here for the 24-inch at the Lowell Observatory. We're going to walk up the hill now. So we were just talking to our friend Paul again. Just before he took off, he was telling us a story. He said there was a conclave of 3 major countries, and they decided to get together and talk about the future of spaceflight, which does have some bearing on Lowell Observatory, because they really focused on Mars, especially in the early part of the 1900s. Anyway, he's saying that these 3 countries got together, Russia, America, and let's say China, and they decided, well, they were going to talk about their goals for the future, spaceflight, manned spaceflight. So the Russians said, well, you know, we were really trying to get to the moon. We didn't quite get there, but we think we want to be able to get to the moon now. And then the Americans said, no, ours is going to be Mars. And this other country, unnamed, said, well, dude, we are going to completely eclipse you guys. You know where we're going? we're going to the sun. And they said, you can't go to the sun. And they said, well, we got a couple of options. We can go to the sun and land on a sunspot because it's cooler there, or we can wait till it's night outside to go. Okay, so here we are. We're walking up Mars Hill Road. As you look over here, you can see what looks to be either A, an observatory, or B,
A water tower.
tower. And I'm also noticing, if you look right up through there, another structure. So let's continue with our explorations. 2 days ago, we were on Mount Whitney, and we were on a steep incline like this, and we parked the trailer, and Vanessa says, boy, I sure can feel gravity pulling me down this hill, and she's absolutely right. So it's really funny, but in astronomy we have this idea of what is called a gravity well. We're having to climb out of a pretty serious gravity well right now. I bet you this is at least a 10 to 12% grade. We're happy not to have brought the trailer up here. So there you go, we really are trying to climb to mount a highway to the stars out of a gravity well, even though our feet are firmly, sort of, on the ground. So we are on the observatory grounds, and there's a structure. Now it should be of no surprise that you kind of need a place for astronomers to crash whenever they're on long observing excursions. Many observatories book astronomers from all over the world to do observing projects to support their theses and their studies. And so here we go. Looks like a nice little small mansion. Okay, here we are actually at the entrance portal to the observatory grounds. And one thing to notice is that obviously Lowell and his proteges were very interested in planetary astronomy. And of course the signs, the classic signs of the planetary systems are on this stele. Of course it begins with Mercury, closest to the sun. Notice there's no sun here, so apparently they weren't particularly interested in solar astronomy. Then you go on to Venus, the Earth, Mars, Jupiter, which looks like a 4. Saturn almost looks like a crook for reining things in. Then you've got Neptune here, Uranus, Neptune, and then finally Pluto. And I, among astronomers, really do believe that Pluto is a planet, despite some of the arbitrary characteristics that were placed on it by other astronomers later in the turn of the millennium. The planet can't possibly sweep its orbit. It's way too far out there. The orbit is too far out for it to have removed all material from its orbit. That's a rather arbitrary distinction. It is a sphere. It actually has its own satellite. So yes, let's restore Pluto and have 9 planets once again in the Sol system. We may discover some more out there, but let's stay with the classic 9. Thank you. As I said, we've entered the observatory grounds here, and you can see there are a number of buildings. There probably are full-time maintenance personnel. There's also an operator of an observatory and maintenance staff, which may live up here or may live down in town. The function of the operator is to be the person who controls the observatory's motions, the direction that the aperture opens to the sky, and the position of the telescope for any given observation session. So that kind of personnel may actively live here, as well as a full-time resident astronomer. We don't know that for sure. We're thinking that reservations required is not just to walk up here, although they don't want any vehicles up here, but it has to do with the fact that you can actually spend several $100s and book an occasion to come up to use the observatory. And you can see here, the observatory has been around since 1894. So many of the observations were occurring before the 20th century. You can see there's an astronomer, perhaps a profile of Percival himself, at the eyepiece of the telescope. Once again, reiterating the fact that photography didn't really enter in until later in the 20th century, when this observatory actually demonstrated the existence of a 9th planet, Pluto, using photography and blink comparator in order to expose some object moving against the background stars, which was I'm not sure which of these domes was used by Percival Lowell. That one's way too small for a 24-inch long focus refractor. That one probably is an upgraded version of the observatory that occurred over time. It probably houses a refractor. Can't verify this, maybe in captions later on. As battery runs low, here is the visitor center. It's a steel visitor center. And they do conduct walk-up, observing apparently exclusive no-wait stargazing. Visitor center. Vanessa has discovered what, Vanessa?
This is here. This is a Mars kaleidoscope.
You should be able to see features of Mars. Very nice. Unfortunately, there's vapor all over the lens. but that sphere itself isn't highly reminiscent of Mars in my estimation, even through a small scope. The grounds, the original observatory. That may very well have been a water tower, who knows? Visitor parking. Vehicles are driving up. There's your suite. And that's the end for us. Battery dying. Adios.